Have you ever watched a striker score a banger only for VAR to rule it out because the ball brushed his arm by accident? I bet you didn't know that a keeper can only hold the ball for 8 seconds before starting the play. Football is full of weird rules that barely make sense. So let's break down the ones that still confuse everyone, even the players. First up, accidental handballs still cancel goals. The handball rule has turned into this weird part of football where you almost feel bad celebrating. The rule is if the ball hits an attacker's arm by accident and ends up in the net, it doesn't matter how unlucky it was, the goal won't stand. Just ask Gabriel Jesus. He thought he'd scored a late winner for Manchester City against Tottenham in 2019, only for VAR to spot a handball in the build-up by Laporte. What makes it confusing is that the same thing can happen to a defender, and the play just carries on. It's meant to keep things fair, but most fans end up scratching their heads. You see players score, celebrate, then stand around awkwardly waiting for VAR to decide whether an arm they couldn't even move properly ruined the whole thing. It feels harsh, especially because attackers aren't even trying to gain an advantage half the time. But that's the rule, and everyone knows it now. But while this rule keeps messing up goals, here's one. Nobody seems to take so seriously, not even the referees. Goalkeepers can hold the ball for only 8 seconds. There's this official rule that keepers can only hold on to the ball for 8 seconds before they have to let it go. In real life, no one actually times it. You'll see a keeper pick the ball up, look around, pretend to organize the defense, check where the strikers are, and still keep holding it way past 8 seconds. And somehow, the ref usually doesn't care. It was initially 6 seconds. However, IFAB changed it on the 1st of July, 2025. It's one of those rules that exists more on paper than on the pitch. The funny bit is when a ref suddenly decides to enforce it, usually late in a tight game, everyone acts shocked even though technically it's always been there. It doesn't really ruin the game, but it is strange to have a clear rule that everyone openly ignores. But if you thought that was confusing, wait till you see how attackers can legally ghost past defenders just by staying in their own half. You can't be offside in your own half. The offside rule has enough gray areas already, but the part that always feels strange is this. If you're still in your own half when your teammate plays the ball, you can't be offside at all, even if you're sprinting behind every defender. Remember Son Heung-min's goal versus Burnley in 2019, where he picked up the ball deep inside his half, ran past 6 players, and scored one of the most iconic solo goals in Premier League history. And there was no flag or VAR check. Well, that was because the run started before he even crossed halfway. It looks unfair in real time, but it's completely legal. It makes sense on paper because you're technically not goal hanging, but when you see it happen, it looks odd. Defenders try to hold a high line, but if the striker times it perfectly, they can start the run in their own half and go clean through. And by the time they cross the halfway line, it's too late to catch them. Watching it in slow motion, you get why it works. But watching in real time always feels a bit unfair to the defense. Now let's move to a rule that's way more basic. But players still somehow mess up every week. Both feet must be on or behind the line for throw-ins. Most, if not all, football fans know this. Throw-ins sound like the simplest thing until you actually look closely. The rule says both feet must be on or behind the line when the ball leaves your hands. It sounds easy, but players have to balance getting the distance on the throw while trying not to step over. You see them doing little hops, dragging a toe, or bending awkwardly to keep both feet down. What's funny is refs almost never call it, unless it looks really obvious. So most of the time it becomes a bit of an honesty policy. You watch match highlights and sometimes spot a player's foot clearly over the line, but the game just goes on. It doesn't usually decide matches, but it does feel like a rule everyone knows but half forgets during the game. 2 yellows get you sent off, but 1 bad tackle might not. This part of the rules can feel unfair when you watch it happen. If a player picks up 2 fairly soft yellow cards, he ends up getting sent off, even if neither foul looked that serious on its own. But then, if someone else makes a wild, dangerous tackle, he just gets a single yellow. It all comes down to how the referee judges each tackle, but from the stands, it often feels random. Players and fans know it too. You'll see them surround the ref, trying to argue why one was worse than the other. The rule itself isn't bad, but in practice, it can look harsh when the second foul is barely worse than the first. And sometimes the player who committed the worst foul stays on, which only adds to the frustration. Talking about frustration. If you think this rule is harsh, try giving the opponent a free shot inside your own box, without it being a penalty. The indirect free kick inside the penalty area. This one always catches people by surprise. If a keeper handles a deliberate back pass from a teammate with his hands or takes too long holding the ball, the punishment isn't a penalty. Instead, it's an indirect free kick inside the penalty area. In 2020, Manchester United got an indirect free kick against Aston Villa after Orjan Nyland held the ball too long. It looked chaotic, and players crowded the box, but nothing really happened. The thing is, it rarely leads to a goal because of how crowded it gets, but the atmosphere is pure chaos. What's weird is, it feels like such a huge punishment on paper, giving an attacker the ball inside the box. Yet in practice, it almost never results in a goal. Speaking of awkward restarts, remember when dropped balls actually meant something? Well, not anymore. Dropped balls aren't really contested anymore. The dropped ball used to be one of those strange, slightly old-school moments in football where two players squared up to boot the ball the second it hit the grass. It was unpredictable and sometimes genuinely funny. But a few years ago, the rule changed. Now, the ref just hands the ball back to the team that last touched it, and everyone else has to stay a few meters away. It makes sense from a fairness point of view, but it definitely lost the drama that came with players hustling for the ball. These days, the ref stops play, gently rolls it back to the keeper or the player who had it, and the game carries on without anyone contesting. It still counts as a dropped ball officially, but it's nothing like what it used to be. The weird part is how it feels almost ceremonial now, almost like pressing resume on a video rather than restarting play. And just when you think the weirdness is over, imagine the ref stops your game, just to hand out a yellow card everyone completely forgot about. Referees can go back to give a yellow card. This rule actually makes sense when you explain it, but watching it live always feels a bit weird. So imagine this. A player gets fouled, the ref sees the team still has a good attacking chance, so he lets play continue. Then, when the ball finally goes out or the attack ends, the ref issues the yellow card. For the player getting booked, it probably feels like punishment delayed, like forgetting you left your clothes in the washing machine. For fans, it sometimes looks random, because by the time it happens, everyone has almost forgotten the foul. A classic example was Kevin De Bruyne versus Wolves in 2022. He was fouled in midfield, got up, kept going, and City created a great chance. Then, long after the ball was gone, the ref tracked back and booked the Wolves player. The logic behind it is solid. Don't ruin a promising attack with a stoppage. But in practice, it can feel strange when the foul wasn't that bad, or the advantage didn't even lead to anything. What makes it funny is when the player starts celebrating a goal only to turn around and realize they're getting booked seconds later. Goalkeepers can't really be challenged in the air. Goalkeepers get more protection than anyone else on the pitch, especially when they jump to catch the ball. You'll see a keeper come flying out, arms swinging, sometimes knee up, and even if they completely miss the ball and collide with a striker, the striker often gets called for the foul. Defenders and attackers can push and shove each other in the box all day, but the moment a keeper is involved, the ref's whistle comes out fast. It makes sense because keepers have to look up at the ball and can get hurt landing awkwardly, but it does feel slightly unfair sometimes. Fans get frustrated watching it because the keeper can basically punch through a crowd and still get the free kick. It's not like keepers are deliberately reckless, but the rule gives them a kind of invisible shield. But the award for most painful rule, especially if you're a striker, definitely goes to this next one. VAR offside decisions can be microscopic. VAR was supposed to clear up offside decisions, and it sort of has, but it also introduced the funniest kind of frustration, seeing goals ruled out because of a striker's toenail or a tiny bit of shoulder leaning forward. It's technically correct, because even the smallest part of the body you can score with counts, but it feels so harsh in real time. Just look at Timo Werner during his Chelsea days. The man was cursed by VAR. Real Chelsea fans remember that goal against Liverpool in 2021 that was disallowed because his arm was slightly ahead. It was invisible in real time, but VAR caught it. Strikers hate it because they're doing what they've always done. Timing runs by instinct. But now, a moment's hesitation or leaning too far can ruin the whole thing. The rule hasn't changed. Offside is still offside, but VAR made it so precise that sometimes it feels like it goes against the spirit of why the rule exists. The funny thing is, for all the weird, messy, or straight-up confusing rules, we still love this game exactly as it is. Some rules will probably never change, some might get even weirder, and we'll keep arguing about them anyway. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which football rule still makes zero sense to you. Catch you in the next one.